Hello everybody, this is Mrs. Draves, and I am here to talk to you guys a little bit about gastropods, and what you learned today will help prepare you for our lab that we're going to do with live snails. So everything I talk about here you want to jot down on paper. I will be checking your pre-lab flip notes before we actually start the lab, just to make sure that everybody is prepared, okay? So here we actually have an image of the giant African land snail. There's two of them here. They are a gastropod, and gastropods have a lot of unique characteristics that I want to share with you now. The first is that they include a wide variety of different types of mollusks, meaning that they are the most numerous and the most diverse. Examples of gastropods include snails, which is what we will use in class, whelks, periwinkles, abalone, slugs, and the marine ones are the sea slugs or nudibranchs. Like I said before, this is the largest group of mollusks, and they have no shell. Some of them have no shell and some of them do. And so we'll see a variety of those. As far as where we find them, the niches that they have exploited include the saltwater and freshwater ecosystems on Earth, as well as terrestrially on land. As far as the way that they obtain energy, they can eat plants for some species, which means that they are herbivorous or herbivores. Some of them are omnivorous or omnivores, meaning that they eat plant and other animals. And then some of them are specialized carnivores. They eat only other animals. And then we finally also have some that are scavengers. They just eat whatever. And there are some that are parasites. So they have had the ability to exploit all different kinds of ecosystems, as well as trophic levels in a food chain. In all mollusks, and we've talked about this in class before, there are three things, or three main parts of a mollusk body that we find in all of the groups. So again, if you remember, one of the classes is the class Bivalvia, which are the clams, the class Gastropoda, which are the snails and sea slugs and so on that we're talking about right now. And there's another class called the cephalopods, which include the octopi and squid and cuttlefish. And there's another group, Polyplacophora, which are the chitons. And there's a few other obscure, smaller groups of mollusks as well. But if we were to look at all of them have these three things. They all have a muscular foot, and this muscular foot doesn't necessarily have to look exactly like what we would think a snail foot to be. There's a variety of modifications to this particular part, as we see across the entire phylum. They also have a visceral mass, so they are coelomate, which means that they have a body cavity, and in that body cavity they have the ability to develop organs and organ systems, including the digestive system, circulation, respiration, and reproductive. So all of this stuff takes up space, and so this body cavity called the coelom allows for it to develop. Again, that's called the visceral mass. Viscera is another word for the guts. And the third part is the mantle. The mantle actually houses the gills in what we're talking about today with snails. And it also has the ability to secrete calcium, and it creates calcium carbonate through a chemical reaction with ocean water, and that helps to produce their shell if they have one. And the shell is protective in the fact that it's protecting the entire visceral mass inside of it. So the shell is definitely a protective component. But we will notice as we investigate further that the shell is somewhat absent or completely absent in some other mollusks. And so to combat that, you think about how do they protect themselves. And so we'll find out that specifically in the cephalopod group, they have a pretty amazing ability to defend themselves through many adaptations. And we'll get into that at a later time. And another interesting thing about the mantle is that it can heal. There's been numerous occasions, I'm sure you've heard, where maybe a snail's shell is broke or a clam shell breaks. And what happens is it can actually heal it. Just like when we get a cut, our skin regenerates. And so shells have that ability as well. So you may come across a shelled mollusk that looks like it has scar on the shell. And that may indeed be true, and you can infer that maybe there was some kind of battle that they survived. And so luckily they have this tissue called the mantle that allows for the shell to grow back. But you can still see the battle wounds. So if we were to look at the snail specifically and look at where these three things are, we can look at this picture here. And you can draw this picture on your paper. That would be good. A simple drawing. And identify the mantle. So the mantle would be inside the shell. It actually lies adjacent to the shell, which is ideal because this is where it secretes the shell and grows. So as a snail grows, this part here is the oldest part, whereas this part at the edge is the newer part, or the younger part. They also have a muscular foot, as you can see here, and this will be definitely evident when we see them live in class. And then the viscera would include all of the organs that are labeled in this picture. So they definitely have a mouth, and this mouth, we'll learn in a little bit, has this part to it called the radula, which helps it feed, and that pushes the food back into its stomach. It digests it with some digestive gland, and then it makes its way through the digestive system, and then it comes out the anus. So they have an anus and they have a mouth, which gives them what we call a complete digestive system. And if you remember where this anus is, it kind of lies adjacent to the mouth. So there's a problem here because what can happen is they can accidentally eat their own feces, which is what zoologists refer to as fouling. So if you remember, they have this, as they grow from a larval stage to an adult, they undergo a process called torsion. And torsion is the 180-degree twisting rearrangement of their digestive system so that their anus migrates 180 degrees. And that's that arm motion that we always do in class. And torsion is important because otherwise the waste would end up back here in the shell and they would have to carry their waste their entire life, which would get heavy, and it can also cause disease because it can get infested with bacteria. So torsion's a good thing, but at the same time it can cause what I mentioned before, fouling. And fouling is when they accidentally eat their own feces. Pictured below is another example of a gastropod. This here is a sea slug, also called a nudibranch, and these are shellless. So this is, I think that we know about slugs that live on land. We may have them in our garden as a nuisance species, which may be our only interaction with any kind of gastropod, is knowing that slugs are a nuisance species in gardens. Or if you've ever eaten escargot is snail, and usually they serve those in like fine restaurants. So that may be our only past experience with gastropods. So with that said, learning this today is a good thing because we're getting to learn a little bit more about this amazing group of animals. In this particular case here, the sea slug, they are shellless. So they are like their cousin counterparts, the garden snails or slugs that we see in our garden as a nuisance species. One thing I would like to show you right now is a quick video of a snail gliding along on glass. And as you watch this, I want you to make note of the muscles as they undulate. So look very closely in here. They're undulating muscles. This snail is also secreting mucus to glide along as it moves about the substrate. So when in the lab, you're going to notice that there may be a mucus trail that is left behind, and usually that is significant that a snail has been in the area. Another thing I want to show you is the snail radula. The snail radula is located inside the mouth, and in your lab there's a handout, there's a picture of this on the inside. So this area right here, where it's round and the thing comes in and out, is the radula. And the radula has a series of teeth that are on it, and these little teeth are aligned on this structure called the odontophore. And the odontophore kind of supports the teeth, and the radula moves back and forth along the odontophore, kind of like on a conveyor belt. And so they use these teeth to serrate or scrub the surface upon which the food is located. So it goes out and in, out and in. And so then the food gets shoved back up in there into its esophagus to its stomach and digestive gland, and then out the anus. And then you can also see there's a good muscular foot here for you to see. And just to conclude this lesson, I want to talk to you guys about snails that are very abundant around here, in particular pouch snails. So if you were ever to go into a stream and maybe collect some specimen from the stream with a net, you may come across a snail. And one of the very common type of snails that we have here in our streams is the pouch snail. And what's really interesting is that the pouch snail, it opens up to the left. So if you were to look at a snail and just have it face you, if this opening is on the left, that means it's some type of pouch snail. But it also indicates poor water quality. So pouch snails actually have the ability to breathe air. So they not only can get oxygen out of water, but they can also get it out of air. So as a result, if they need oxygen, they can breathe it from the air while being in polluted water. But the antithesis of this would be a right-handed snail. And right-handed snails can only breathe water. So they are intolerant to pollution. So if you find a right-handed snail, which would be one that's, actually more like this, where it opens to the right, and this is the opening here on the right side, that would indicate better water quality. So you can actually assess the stream and its quality based off of the presence or absence of these particular snails. So it's really interesting to make note of the ecological importance of them and how we can use them to assess the quality of our environment that we live in, specifically in this case, streams. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully you guys got all those notes, and you guys will be ready for the lab tomorrow. This will give you a lot of information to help you complete the lab.